Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Star Wars: The Living Force by John Jackson Miller. For those of you who are not aware, John Jackson Miller is my favorite media tie-in fiction author. He writes Star Wars, he writes Star Trek, he has an upcoming Batman novel coming out, so he writes a lot of tie-in books, and I love his novels. And he is, as I said, no stranger to Star Wars. He's been around for a decent bit now. He has 4 previous books for Star Wars. He had his first novel, Knight Errant, which is very underrated. A lot of people dislike this book, but I loved it. Then you have Lost Tribe of the Sith, which is a short story / novella collection set in the Old Republic era that's really good. And then he wrote my absolute favorite Star Wars novel of all time, my absolute favorite of all time, Kenobi. Like this, I even put this in as one of my top favorite novels of all time, not just for Star Wars, but for anything. This book is amazing. I always recommend it to people. I even got a teacher in high school to read it who's not a Star Wars fan, and she really enjoyed it because of how good just a book it is. And then he also wrote A New Dawn, which was the first canon novel in the new canon that's been established. And John, I think this did a terrific job with this. This is one of the most underrated canon novels out there. So this is a really good book. And so he had, I thought, a good track record. And then he went off and did Star Trek books for the last decade. And so he hasn't come back to Star Wars in a while until now. This is his first book in 10 years for Star Wars, and it is a massive story that he tries to tell here. The basic premise of this book is that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan realize that the Council and really the Jedi Order as a whole are not focusing on the living force. They're putting all of their attention on the cosmic force. And so people aren't focusing on the day-to-day helping of individual people. They're really only focusing on the bigger picture of the galaxy. And Qui-Gon feels that is bad for the Jedi. And so Qui-Gon suggests that the Jedi Order, specifically the Council, find a way to refocus themselves, maybe a retreat of some sort. And so the Jedi Council decides to go on a retreat to the planet Quen, where they will try to help the individual people in different ways, and also throw a celebration celebrating the Jedi outpost on Quen. At the same time that this is happening, the Jedi have been abandoning outposts in this area of space because the Republic is starting to pull away from that and focus on the core worlds and other worlds. And as a result, pirates and smugglers are starting to take over this region of space. And so as the Jedi have been pulling out their outposts, these smugglers realize, hey, and we can start to take over stuff. And so these pirate bands join together, and they end up where do they end up? On Quen, where the Jedi Council is. And so you follow the entire Jedi Council in this book. You follow all 12 members. They each have a point of view. Some of them have fewer point of view chapters than others, but they all have point of view chapters, and they're all very much a part of the story. And then you also have, of course, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan who show up throughout the book, and then you also have the villains in the book. So it's a packed book, and that is probably my one biggest complaint about the book, is that it's so packed that it felt like no storyline got enough time to properly develop except the villain storyline. I would say that, focusing, letting each Jedi Council member have a POV is a cool idea and makes the book stand out. It does. But at the same time, it really makes it difficult to feel like each point of view is getting a good character development. So that was my biggest complain about the book. However, I still think that the book is really entertaining throughout, and it has a lot of great ideas. And, at the beginning of the book, we really get to see just how Jedi help out average people, normal people, how the Jedi focus on the living force. That stuff is really interesting in the beginning of this book. You get to see, I know that in some media they've described the Jedi as monks, and this is the best representation of the Jedi being monk-like that I've ever seen in Star Wars, because you really see them giving up their own things to help others. You see them sacrifice things, not just like their lives in battle, but just sacrifice things in general to help out other people who are having a hard time. And I thought that that was really well done in this book. And you also see the contrast. You see the focus that the Council and all the other Jedi have put on the cosmic force, and you see them meeting with senators and businessmen, and you see them focusing on trade routes and stuff. And so you see how the Jedi Order has this push and pull of two things that they're trying to accomplish, and neither one is doing it right because they're pulled in two different directions. And it's just a fascinating idea in the book. With the 12 point of view characters, some of them stood out more than others. Some of them I thought were just kind of like their storylines were forgettable. Ironically, Yoda probably had one of the least interesting storylines. Him and Adigalia wasn't particularly interesting. However, Depa Billaba is the character that got the most time in this book because she's the Jedi who's embedded with the bad guys. She's kind of spying, gathering information with them, and so she's the one you follow the most. And I didn't love her story as much as the others, but she got at least a full story with character development and stuff, her and Mace Windu. And then we also got Yaddle, who was just fascinating. Yaddle has that wizened perspective, but also feels very whimsical at times. And so Yaddle was a very interesting character to follow. I liked her. Also, Yariel Poof was the standout character in the whole book, because every time he was on in a chapter, I laughed at least once out loud as I was reading it. Like, I'm saying he was hysterical as a character. And if you've ever watched the Robot Chicken Star Wars stuff, in Robot Chicken, they do like a couple of minutes spoofing Yariel Poof, and he's just this silly, underappreciated Jedi Council member, and they all pick on him and stuff. And in this book, he is hilarious. His line delivery is just funny, and he's constantly cracking jokes, and he kind of feels it sometimes that he's underappreciated. So it's funny that his character from this almost lines up with his Robot Chicken character, which is just kind of funny. But really, Yariel Poof, I loved whenever he was on the page. And then I also liked when Evan Peel was on the page, because he just has this kind of seriousness to him that I really appreciated, and he just made it, when you contrast him with another character like Yariel Poof, it's like two polar opposites. That was really entertaining. I also thought that Ki-Adi-Mundi had some fun, entertaining moments in this book as well. The whole helmet discussion, that was hysterical. I loved it. So it's funny because John's not necessarily the most humorous writer, and yet this book had a lot of good humor in it. This book is also tonally very much in line with the prequels. Especially Phantom Menace. That's one of the things that I think the prequel novels have absolutely nailed, is the ability to feel like you're reading a prequel book. I would say Master and Apprentice absolutely gets those vibes of Phantom Menace. And I would say that Brotherhood absolutely feels like the quintessential Attack of the Clones novel. And then Rise of the Red Blade absolutely feels like the quintessential Revenge of the Sith novel. And so it's interesting that we're getting these prequel books that just feel so absolutely like hit the nail on the head with the tone. And this book is one of those. It absolutely felt like a great prequel era book. So I loved that. I also, I mentioned I really like the questions it raised. It also raises questions about how do Jedi deal with conflict. Should they go in guns blazing, or rather lightsabers blazing? Should they be more trying to find a diplomatic solution first? And if so, at what point do you abandon the diplomatic solution? And what are the Jedi willing to sacrifice in order to accomplish their goals? Because they do have to sacrifice things sometimes. And it's just an interesting questions that are raised that I think John does a really good job of. Most of his previous novels, there's the running theme, I would say particularly between A New Dawn, Kenobi, and Knight Errant. There's a running theme between those books where he focuses on a Jedi who's alone, who no longer is connected to an order and has to figure out what a Jedi does by themselves. This is like the absolute opposite of that. What do the Jedi do when they're gathered? What do the Jedi do when they're together? So it's interesting to see him tackle the absolute opposite idea in this book. So I just found that really fascinating. As an overall book, I would say that I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Really, really enjoyable. The number of POVs was a little bit much. The book either should have been longer, and it should have been an epic, and that way we could really get enough time with each of the POVs, or they should have found a way to cut it down. Now, we would have lost the gimmick, the uniqueness of having every council member being a POV. We would have lost that if they had cut down the POVs, but I think the book would have been tighter, it would have been more focused, it would have been more entertaining in that way. But still, despite that criticism, I still think this is an amazing book. I still think this is a really entertaining book, and so I'm very happy that it's out. I will, if I had to just say where it falls compared to the other books, it is, I think, better than Knight Errant and Lost Tribe of the Sith. I think it's definitely better than those two, and I think it's just below A New Dawn for me, and of course nothing's gonna catch up to Kenobi. I mean, maybe something will one day, but as of right now, nothing's gonna hit Kenobi, and the heights it has is the #1 Star Wars book of all time for me. But I think this is just below A New Dawn, so it's right in the middle, actually, of his Star Wars books. But still, I think even his worst Star Wars book is still very entertaining, and this book I thought was very entertaining as well. So if you've read The Living Force, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Did you get this release day? I'm very excited to see so many book reviewers and just book readers getting this book. It's really captured the attention of the Star Wars book fandom, and I'm really excited for that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.